What if Bitcoin is the necessary change we need in society in order for us to solve major social issues like climate change? Today, we talked with Jeff Booth, a serial entrepreneur and the author of The Price of Tomorrow. And we had a great conversation with him about why things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies could be the key to unlocking and actually addressing some of the major social issues we have in the world today. So, with that being said, please check if you're subscribed because it really helps the channel out and it allows us to do great conversations like these with many other really interesting entrepreneurs and creatives working on solving some of the world's biggest social issues, specifically surrounding climate change. And with that being said, here's Jeff Booth.
I'm a technology entrepreneur, have been for the last 20 odd years. Today, a privileged position to be on a bunch of different boards, co-founder of a bunch of different companies. So just a front seat view of how fast technology is changing the world. And as a byproduct of that, that's why I wrote the book. I felt that everybody was missing something right in front of our eyes, and it would lead to chaos if we didn't address it. And so I wrote the book largely for my kids and generation coming, because that thing that's right in front of our nose, if you don't address it, the world burns.
So, would you mind diving into a little bit around your thesis that you're trying to explore within the book, The Price of Tomorrow?
Well, the thesis is this, and it's driven from my career in technology and what I see in technology today. Technology provides efficiency, and that efficiency is deflationary. And technology is not like technology of the 50s, 60s, 70s. Technology is moving exponentially. So it's creating deflation or efficiency that wants prices to go down. And those prices going down means abundance to society. We get more for less on a scale, and it just keeps going forever. More for less, more for less, more for less. But it's fighting a world in which we've grown up in and we've always known, which is an inflationary monetary policy where prices need to go up. So those two great forces colliding against each other are the cause of just about all of the other pain and everything else that people are talking about in their lives, and we can go into some of those things. But the thesis is quite simply: technology is here to stay. It's exponential, and that means prices should be coming down exponentially everywhere. Why aren't they? So that's what I explored in the book. Why aren't they? What's going to happen next? All of the different repercussions of that fight.
And one interesting thing about how this model helps push us towards more renewable sources of power, specifically solar, as the cost has come down year over year pretty consistently. So would you mind actually diving into that aspect of how deflationary economics in this case applies to the energy industry and how it's going to help accelerate renewable energy specifically?
You mind if before we do that, we just simplify kind of what is deflation, what is inflation? Because this is such a hard concept to understand, because we always grew up in an inflationary world. We've been told all our lives inflation is a good thing. Inflation, because if you stopped inflation, people wouldn't buy things and the economy would collapse. And so we must have inflation. So we've grown up with that narrative, and it's generationally believable. So we don't question it. So let's examine that a little deeper. What is inflation? All it is when your money is worth less over time. So goods and services cost more in relation to money. So not good or bad. It's just a fact. That's what it is. And deflation is the opposite side of that coin. So deflation is when goods and services cost less in relation to your money, meaning your money is worth more. So on both those different tangents, so if you have a whole bunch of credit or debt, and you have deflation, if you have inflation, then the credit or debt is paid back later with cheaper money. So it's good for credit and debt. It's also good because asset prices, people store their wealth in asset prices like houses, stocks. And so it's good for people who have assets. So it's good for debt, good for people who have assets if you're trying to drive inflation. On the other side of that coin, on deflation, if you allowed deflation, then it's bad for debt because the debt gets wiped out because you have to pay back the debt with less later on, so the debt gets more expensive in real terms. And deflation is good for savers, and it's good for your money. It's good for people working, the lower income people working for wages, because their wages retain value over time instead of get eroded away. So once you understand that, then you can question, is inflation good or is it bad? Or because it actually doesn't matter. If technology is providing better, lower and lower costs, then whether we like one of those things or not, it changes the rules, right? And so if you fight this technology force, you're going to concentrate wealth as a byproduct, and you're going to keep concentrating wealth as a byproduct. And the more you do that, it breaks society. When you take that to your question about solar or any other industry. So what's happening today is solar is one of the cheapest energy sources, and it's coming on and it's additive to the overall infrastructure of energy, overall energy grid. So it's additive. So it's lowering price and it's cheaper, and it's just started. It just kind of passed commercial viability everywhere, and it's exploding, and it's gaining traction and driving prices down further and further and further. But energy isn't just energy. It is the thing that drives every other industry. If you have lower cost energy, then your nation competes better than other nations because it powers energy is first to everything.
Helps with any manufacturing, any lifestyle changes.
Everything, transportation, right. Everything. It's and so lower. If you have an advantage in energy, in fact, if you go back, why do you think the U.S. government wanted to low cost oil and would military might to low cost oil? It's an advantage in energy that gives an advantage geopolitically around the world. So now we have an energy innovation, and the innovation's been there since the 50s, but it's getting better. And now it's commercial viability, and it's moving lower and lower all the time. A whole infrastructure of batteries is behind it that's reaching commercial viability, and those prices are falling. So one of the most important things that drives everything else, energy, is now going to be deflationary.
Okay.
And additive to the entire prices coming down.
Okay.
So if you work in a system that requires inflation, then all of that innovation that is good for the planet, good for everybody else, good for what you would think, why wouldn't we want prices coming down in our lives and to be able to work less? You think you'd want that. But if you work in a system that requires inflation to pay back debt and credit that can't be paid back, then you have to eradicate the gains of that innovation by printing more money to make prices go up. So in other words, most of the people today, and even in they care about the planet and everything else, are thinking about all of this innovation in a system that can't allow that innovation, because the monetary system, the entire global monetary system, requires forever growth, more and more growth forever. So no matter what you do, you keep on eradicating those gains.
So in the sense of this example of clean technologies, right? We obviously operate in a system right now, which is, of course, driving growth that's definitely not sustainable, especially right now due to the pandemic. In the small focus on clean tech, since that's what both our listeners and myself are a little bit more aware of in terms of an industry, what would actually be the difference in terms of adoption of, let's say, solar energy on everyone's homes now that we've reached a stage where people can actually afford to adopt it at scale, and we've well past the utility scale for adoption on solar, but now even residential customers are able to adopt it. So when we look at the current economic system versus a deflationary based system, what would be the key differences in simple English in your mind that would help a person differentiate between the two economic systems that we could be using to help promote more renewable energy, let's say?
And again, that question is going to be so hard for your listeners to get to, because and you probably did the same thing as you were reading my book. Like, I take everybody through it step by step by step, but
Right.
it's so hard because we measure everything from the existing system,
Right.
and the new system is totally different. It's like Blockbuster trying to see Netflix
Right.
and trying to stop it. It's just a totally different mental model. It's everything changes. If we go back to kind of the premise, and I use this example in the book as well, but if I fold a piece of paper on itself and I fold it and I continue to fold it on itself up to 50 times, I can only fold it 7 times. But if I could fold it 50 times, that piece of paper would reach to the sun. And you know that by reading this and everything else, everybody misses that answer. We think when we hear okay, fold it on itself, we think it's going to be about 2 inches and it reaches the sun. And if everybody we know misses that answer, unless they've already heard it, then they think, oh, I'm smarter than everybody else. But, but if you actually really look into it, everybody misses the answer. Everybody misses the answer unless they've heard it. And so if that's the case, then we all miss exponential patterns as well. Yet we have an exponential pattern in technology, Moore's law and quantum after that, and what's happening in AI, moving at a rate we cannot comprehend.
Right.
And that exponential pattern. So if we all miss that exponential pattern, and technology is driving that exponential pattern in society today, and that technology is driving deflation at that rate,
right,
then we're liable to miss that too. And so why that matters first is if you compare that paper folding exercise to Moore's law, we're on fold 33 going to fold 34. So the last 50 years of technology is going to double in the next 18 months to 2 years.
Right.
And we think it's moving linear. When we think about where self-driving cars are today, when we think about where solar is, or some of these innovations, we're thinking what it was in history, moving on a linear pattern going forward. We're not thinking against the doubling, and that's the mistake we will all make. But it's doubling, and where can you see evidence of this? So if that thesis is correct, then you should see evidence in the monetary system that's trying to stop that price declines in abundance to us, trying to inflate that away. And that was the thing that I just when the smoking gun is right there, right? And so global debt to GDP globally is $250 trillion of debt to $80 trillion of GDP. And that's bad enough. So if you think about how big these numbers are, $1 trillion in seconds is 32,710 or 31,710 years to pay back $1 a second. So the numbers are truly staggering. It can't be paid back.
Right.
But moreover, you would expect that as technology has really entered those steep steps of folding to the sun, you'd expect that accumulation of debt to be matching on the other side. That's what you would, right? So if you're trying to stop and drive inflation, you would expect to see something here that matched what was happening in technology. And in the last 20 years, out of the $250 trillion of global debt, in the last 20 years, $185 trillion of new debt has been added. So out of the 185 that's before COVID.
And this is happening purely because of, at the rate technology, predominantly technology, has been exponentially growing. So we require more capital to be able to continue to sustain that. Is that like the general premise?
And more, and it's not really more capital. It's because it's changed all the laws of supply and demand and everything else. It's not really. It's I'm going to make up new money. I'm going to destroy the currency to try, because that debt can't be paid back. So once the debt can't be paid back, you start manipulating money supply and keep on pulling this forward to make this. So you're almost pouring money into a hole. That pouring money into the hole is holding asset prices high and making them go higher. A good example here is that people, and again, it is a good example of being caught in a system and trying to understand a new system. People say housing always goes up, real estate always goes up, without asking, would real estate have gone up if there wasn't $185 trillion of stimulus over the last 20 years? And the answer is quite simply no chance. Why is housing more expensive right now in 2021 than it was in the beginning of 2020? And we're in the middle of a pandemic and no one has jobs, and so few people have jobs. It's only because of this action, and you're printing more to try to stop it from going down, because if it goes down, the whole system unwinds and resets. So governments are trapped all over the world. It's not just US, not Canada. It's all over the world are doing the exact same thing.
Because they can't afford a financial crisis.
And so they're telling populations, they're using examples like, we have to print all this money to save the planet.
Right.
We're going to invest in green. We're going to do all this. We're going to print all this money to invest in green. And that sounds great. And I care about it a lot. Right. So there is, whether there's a whole bunch of naysayers as well, but there's a lot of scientific evidence that we can't grow forever, right? It's pretty ridiculous to say on a finite planet we can grow forever.
Right.
Yet our system requires us to grow forever, ever more and more jobs. And listen to all the politics. We're doing this so we have more jobs. So things are, and we have to keep on driving prices higher and higher, so we have more and more jobs. And that's, so you have an embedded growth obligation in the existing system, that if growth slows, the whole system, or slows or goes into deflation, the whole system unwinds in the existing system. And then all of the innovation, all the technology innovation, it's why the technology companies hold so much power today, is driving the other way.
So what this, and let me know if this is wrong in terms of my interpretation of it. Effectively, what you're saying is, by printing more capital and trying to force growth with existing technologies, industries, solutions, like if we even look at the energy market, just because that's where I default back into, continuing to fund and support coal production plants, natural gas, and things of that nature, which we already know are technologies for to be able to source electricity at this point. It's an archaic solution. We need to move to solar at this point. But the core thing that you're trying to explain here is the governments today, in order to avoid the backlash of allowing solar to fully take over and invest truly every dollar into it, because we can technically move every dollar that we were spending into coal plants and move it into solar and have significantly more. Our dollar goes longer at that point. But the government, in the way that our current economy is structured, in order to continue keeping growth going beyond its stage where it's at, because technology has moved far beyond that stage at this point, we have now reached that stage where, if we don't allow progress to continue happening and allow older industries, technologies, and solutions to fully die off and depreciate, then we're going to continue to present this artificial I guess growth is the right term here, but this artificial growth that truly is unsustainable, and when it eventually catches up on itself, then we get something like the '08 housing market, which collapsed.
It's way worse than that. I'm
Okay.
afraid it's way worse than that.
Like Great
There,
Depression level worse, or
worse than like Great Depression or worse. That's where we are.
okay.
The '08 housing problem is caused by the same thing, and every one of these things has been masked and kicked the can down the road.
Right.
But it's not every single price that you pay for today, housing, food, education, it's all mispriced because money itself is mispriced. So money itself is being made up out of nothing to pretend we have growth, to pretend the jobs are there and everything else. And when you do that, so what is inflation on the other side? Like, just keep on coming back to this. Inflation is wage deflation.
Right. Because your money doesn't go as far anymore.
Yeah. So a benefit to one person is pick the pocket of another person.
Right.
So who wins, who loses? So inflation benefits anybody who, like today, look at the stock market all-time highs, look at housing prices all-time highs, everything else. People are winning. Who has the assets, they win. Yet, and there's a whole population going to vote in new leaders to expand that strategy as fast as they can. More money. But even when and this is, and again, no actor in a system, Republican, Democrat, I wish that could I wish that could change things, but no actor in the system can change things because it's a system problem.
Right.
But when you think about all the new money that's coming right now in the US, $2,000 payments, all of this investment and everything else, it's doing this. So essentially, you're giving people more money to be able to pay for prices you're trying to keep high. An order of magnitude bigger problem for our climate is our monetary system. Because it has to, mathematically, it has to, and forget, because everybody talks about coal or solar or everything else. That's a capital decision.
Right.
And people are going to invest. So it's hard to say. We could say all we want about solar. When solar was double or triple the price, people make decisions for themselves. We pretend that to save the planet. So a lot of people would say, yeah, you should do this, but I'm not going to with my family.
Right.
And so, and unfortunately,
and that's kind of the state
it's just the world we were. Economic incentives drive everything. And so when you have commercial viability in solar now, that's getting better and better, the economic incentives are moving to solar, and it clears up all the other stuff.
Right.
Because capital wants to find the best return.
The issue at the heart of it all is just that the system we're in requires pretty much growth at all costs, and growth requires resources, and that's it. Really, that's what it all boils down to, right?
That's what and that growth, except for the growth at all costs, and when we say all costs, including manipulating money to pretend we have growth. That's where it's not really growth. It's just manipulating. It's manipulating the money so we have growth. And what is money in itself? Like, money is an abstract concept. Money is our time, right? So we work for something, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a laborer, whether anything else. I trade my wages and my time, or I trade my time for money that I can spend later.
Right.
And to protect my family, to save to build wealth, to do whatever. It's just a trade. It's an abstract concept for a trade of my time. And so when you manipulate money, you manipulate time. You force everybody. When you do that, you force people to be on this wheel that's moving faster and faster and faster, and they don't know, and they're chasing stores of value to protect their time. And it's embedded across the whole system, and that's causing the polarization. So some people are beneficiaries of that, and their assets are going way up, and they think, wow, I'm brilliant. right? and
Every Tesla holder.
I'm so much smarter than those people that don't have assets because I had them first and we printed a whole bunch of money, right? I'm so much smarter. It's all my brilliance. And then you have other people that are getting killed by that and can never catch up, and they're rising up. And so you force this dislocation into society. But the climate problem part of it is just it's just another symptom. It's just another thing.
It's a cause. It's a cause of the economic system trying to force growth at all costs.
And then we get caught in these narratives, and we get so mad at those people over there and those people over there.
It becomes
all caused because we won't look at the first principle, the thing that's driving it all. And what we're talking about now is the thing that's driving it all. When you try to make a system grow forever unnaturally against the laws of nature and capitalism and everything else and innovation, you can do it, but it has massive consequences.
I mean,
I have a question. If we look at history, I mean, can we compare this to time periods in history, that we can draw some solutions from?
All of the things that I do in technology companies that I'm trying to help are trying to provide a benefit to awesome people, trying to provide a huge benefit to society. They won't all win, won't lose, but they only win when they drive value for you, for society. So in other words, that process has to be deflationary, especially with technology, right? The process of innovation, unless you're going to make prices go up through innovation, then the process has to be deflationary.
Right.
When you stop that process from happening, you concentrate wealth and power. That's it. It's really that simple. And so we have a whole bunch of politicians stopping that process from happening, concentrating wealth and power, dividing everything. And then we have this new narrative, it's the climate, that's the problem. It's those people over there that's causing that problem. And we all believe it. And we get caught in this loop and the new system is so hard to fathom, but it's happening. It's happening anyways, right? It will happen. And so if you look at so I'm of two minds. What's able to happen in a free market and a system that allows technology to thrive, what happens is all of that noise goes away over time, and the abundance is broadly shared with everybody. Prices keep coming down forever. And a lot of people don't see that economics is about scarcity. It's not about value. So when I say prices coming down, you don't pay for the air you breathe because it's valuable, right? Sorry, because it's abundant and it's the most valuable thing in your life. You don't pay for it. You pay for it if you want to go underwater where it's scarce, right? And so economics is about scarcity, but you have technology driving abundance. It's why you don't pay for film on your cameras anymore, or your pictures anymore, and you have billions, but you can take as many as you want for free. And those prices, the same thing is everywhere, and it's coming to a town near you in everything. Food, energy, every single thing is moving naturally moving in there. If you allow that to happen, as jobs come out of society, why do we use technology in the first place? Why do you use technology? To drive efficiency in your life.
Right.
You don't try to make your life more complicated. You try to drive efficiency and everything else. That's why a business uses it. So it removes labor. If you let that happen over time, you wouldn't need more jobs, more things to buy more jobs, more things forever. Prices would just fall naturally, and we would have more abundance for less. That's the way the new system would work.
And it would incentivize more savings, as you mentioned earlier on in the conversation. I mean, I guess then the question that comes out of that, at least to me right off the bat, is how do you even, without causing significant pain, because the only way through, because in reality, not everyone needs to work, and that enables something like universal basic income, which you also mentioned in your book, because then that $2,000 a month is useful. It's enough for you to continue to live, get more. You'll have shelter, you'll have
But
food.
even that concept, what you just said, that universal basic income, if you layer on top basic income today onto the system, that's what it just drives the system, keeps going.
Right, because they're going to expect that.
And
Now everyone has money to spend.
Because so I hold asset prices high, way higher than they should be. So housing, so my rent, so people can't pay the rent. And then because I've done this artificially, I need to give people money to be able to pay the rent. That's what the system looks like. That's when I said none of these solves on the existing system can be a solve, because they're dealing with something that's mathematically impossible to solve.
Just based on the underlying way the system was built in the first place.
Exactly. So it just keeps on that. Now imagine you do that. So you push prices up naturally. A whole bunch of people that are gifted that money for free don't know that they were gifted. They think it's because they're creating value. It's not creating value. It's creating no value for society. Then and so they're mad when you take taxes and you give to these other people who they think aren't creating value when they didn't create value. Right. And so the whole thing, I'm not saying it couldn't work, the universal basic income in the short term to kind of simmer the noise down a level, but in the long term, it's not a cure for this at all. A cure for this is to let prices. What if many things in your life were as free as air?
Because that abundance is becoming available through technology.
We have, for the first time in human history, we have the ability to give abundance to just about to everybody through this process. What we're not, and that's the real problem. What we're doing is stopping that from flowing to everybody, and by doing so, we're concentrating power in people who say, "I'm going to choose who gets what." And you need a bigger and bigger system to choose who gets what when you concentrate that power. But again, even in these questions, it's so hard to contemplate, because everything we measure is from the existing system.
Right. That's what we've grown up with. That's what we've learned to manipulate, use, grow within. It's what people through generations are being taught.
I take my own family and everything else. Do I need more money? No. But okay, I need to protect my wealth somewhere. So where do I put it to protect it, so that when this is happening, that I can protect that wealth? Is that driving benefit to society in largely? Like if I'm just storing it in assets and everything else, no. So so you get misallocated capital everywhere. And the more misallocated capital, the more you have to keep going.
Do you think that's what's happening in Silicon Valley with startups?
well, so I don't. No, not really. In some of the cases, so some of the startups have way too much capital because everybody's searching for that return.
Sure.
Right. And would they have as much capital if you weren't printing as much money? No, they might not need as much capital either.
Right. I mean,
again, the innovation, keep in mind, the capital blows up and it's worth nothing if the innovation isn't valuable to society.
Right. But there are many companies that are using that capital to fund artificial growth. Right.
So it's worse than that. So it's like an injection into Amazon, Google, Facebook, all of these. Like as you're doing this, you're driving more because they know the game, right?
Right.
You have technology companies that are doing far more for less. We're all using them because of the value that they give us.
Right.
And they can remove labor at a rate, AI, everything else. So if you look at how many people they have versus the industries that they've destroyed, you can see it. Now think about the entire economic system. If a government says to me as a CEO, so let's say I'm the CEO of I'm going to pick a bad one. I'm going to pick one so people on your show hate me, but I'm not the CEO. Let's say I'm the CEO of United Airlines and I have a whole bunch of money because everything's doing well on my balance sheet, right? And that money is sitting there, and the government says, I'm going to drive interest rates to zero or negative. And I'm going to make cash worthless. I'm going to try to make cash worthless. What would I do? I would take that cash and I would buy back my stock. I would try to find that cash because the government just said, the Fed just said, I'm making your cash worthless. So I'm going to take that cash and I'm going to buy back stock, and I'm going to enrich people that are close to the company because of that, shareholders and everything else. And I'm going to and my company is going to be really fragile. It doesn't have cash for a rainy day. Then when a rainy day comes, because I have no cash, because the government essentially said, don't keep cash. When a rainy day comes, I'm required to go back to the government to give me money to be able to save all my employees. But with a, if you don't, they're all gone.
And the government wants to continue to support those jobs.
It's ludicrous, and everybody says, "Yeah, do that because we need those jobs." And the entire electorate would say, "Yeah, that's a good. Let's keep doing that because." And you make the entire system weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And if you're a CEO that keeps cash on your balance sheet, you won't be a CEO for very long.
because you're not investing it to grow shareholder value.
You do grow shareholder value. Yeah, the shareholders would rebel against you because every other company would be growing faster than you, or growing shareholder value faster than you. Because you did what was the best move in the system that told you to do it. So
because everyone is just seeking growth at that point.
Well, everybody's seeking to kind of, where can I put my money to get a return?
Because money's not worth anything.
It was not worth anything. And then we're scripting, money is not going to be worth anything. We're going to destroy money. So what do you think that is a byproduct of that? And so,
I mean, I guess that's why we also have seen such a huge wave in individuals reskilling. And not everyone has been fortunate to be put in that position where they have the luxury to reskill themselves. But it's like, it's just a constant battle to see, for at least the lower income and even the middle class, because there seems to be that income inequality being created far more rapidly than I've ever seen before. And we're young, so we haven't seen as many cycles yet. But it's like, can you even sustain that? Because can individuals learn faster than computers? Probably not.
You can't. Again, that goes back to the steep steps we're in right now. You can't. There's some industries that'll do better.
Right.
For anybody that's younger that's listening to the show, find a technology industry that has hit commercial viability and is about to scale. So solar is one of them. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs in solar, and not just in solar, but if you understand the technology behind everything else, batteries, everything else. And so there's a whole bunch of industries that will do really well. They just won't replace all the jobs of the industries they stole. So there are places, if you that's the dilemma for me, the personal dilemma, and why I wrote the book. I'm not because of money printing too. I'm a winner out of that. But my technology companies and the things that I do, one of those companies was zero revenue in 18 months ago. It's now 10 million a month. And so when you know how to construct technology companies to be able to drive this, you can drive tremendous value. And so I spend time on those types of things, and I see the benefit that they can provide. I love it. And there's tons of opportunity on one side, but if you add up all of what I'm just saying, that opportunity has to be deflationary, has to, and it has to remove labor. I'm not putting in technology. I'm putting in technology to win a business or market that nobody sees,
right?
And that is valuable, and it doesn't win unless it's valuable to other people. But I'm not putting in technology, and I'm not building these technologies to make prices go up.
Right. You're trying to
So
increase the amount of value you're providing per dollar, which actually makes capitalism actually work, because fundamentally that's the whole premise of it is if you're delivering value, you should be rewarded for it, which is completely accurate. But we're not seeing that in the current system today, because
people are
I can put in
exactly.
money anywhere almost and it goes up artificially at this point.
So people are questioning capitalism, and when we don't have capitalism, we have crony capitalism. It is not It's not a problem of capitalism. It's a problem of distorting the rules of a free market by distorting monetary policy. And it's an entire and so everywhere. That's the uprisings, everything else. Because you read the book. The book came out last year, and it was written the year before that, and it predicted all of this.
Right. Especially the us versus them situation. We've kind of reached that stage where, I'd say, frankly, I'm worried about what's going to happen in the years to come, because you're accurate that things are moving exponentially, which means the rate of change is just going to continue to accelerate over the next year to two. And, and I don't believe we can at least alleviate any of that pain, which is unfortunate. Which I'd love to hear your thoughts on as well. But it's I don't want to sound dystopian either. But is there any way to really get out of this kind of a system without ripping the Band-Aid right off?
So when I wrote the book, you'll know from the end, this is before COVID, and I was really hopeful that I could drive a conversation into policymakers to be able to stop what we were doing and move towards something and we could gradually get there. Unfortunately, COVID is both an accelerator of everything I talked about, right? So it accelerates technology on one side. Look at what we're doing on Zoom and everything else, and that's global in nature.
Right.
So people are hiring labor around the world. If you're working from home, wouldn't you hire the best person anywhere in the world to work from home? And so that's more deflation, more jobs coming out, everything else. And so it's been an accelerator across that as well. Predictably, it's an accelerator of monetary easing. So you mentioned the 2008 financial crisis. Do you remember the uproar when the printing was 500 billion, 250 billion, then another 250 billion or so? It was like, what? We are just like 500 billion, right? Now we're talking about tens of trillions.
Right.
Predictably, because you have to do this much more. And in a couple of years, we'll be talking about, or 5 years down the road, we'll be 20 trillions. It has to. It's mathematically. So that's what. So unfortunately, the existing system is going to reset, and it's going to be painful for society. I wish I could now, and it can reset in a number of ways. If government stopped printing today, if they said, okay, no more printing, globally, everything would collapse. Right. Every bank would collapse. It would just keep unwinding. Or, in other words, governments themselves would fail, and you would have it'd be ugly.
You would descend into anarchy at that point.
Yeah, and that's because you have all of this credit that can't be paid back, and as soon as it stops growing and people realize it can't be paid back, everybody would race to cash and hoard cash, and the whole thing would collapse again. But the banks don't have the cash either; it's just credit.
Right.
So
because they don't want to hold capital,
but they don't have it. It's actually just based on credit. So as people tried to grab that cash, there's nothing there,
right?
And everything keeps on unwinding. The entire system is. I hate saying this, but it's based on a mirage of never-ending growth and credit. It's just a mirage, but it's a believable one. And so if they stop printing, that's what happens. So that's not a good solution, obviously. If they continue printing then you have society ripping itself apart. And it's not just in one country. So people think it is. And so if the U.S. is printing their dollars, essentially trying to make labor rates go down, then on the other side of the world, that same thing is happening too. So China is doing the same thing, and Europe is doing the same thing. So you got to start to get these geopolitical wars, and it gets worse and worse, and that escalates. And so you asked a question before about what, if you look through history, what happens. These monetary events are always reset through war. Always.
Yeah, it's each world war that's happened.
And before that, the Roman Empire collapse, the Byzantine Empire. It's always through.
It's cyclical.
It's and I actually think Bitcoin could be the only way to get to the other side without that type of catastrophe, because it resets the world. It resets on a fixed currency that you have to have with deflation. What we're happening with what's happening with technology, whether I like it or not, we have to have a system that allows for deflation to be able to drive the benefits of technology broadly to society. It's a requirement.
It's that's, I guess, the advantage of cryptocurrencies, and as of right now, it is Bitcoin that's dominating every existing one. But how would you even go about implementing a cryptocurrency into a global economy which is dependent on continuous growth no matter where capital is placed? Because you need widespread adoption, where people need to feel that if we don't do this, the collapse needs to be painful enough to justify sacrificing artificial growth of the capital you have, which most people would just say, I'm looking out for myself. So
that's actually why. And funny enough, I don't think anyone's actually ever asked me this question, and the way I answer it is from a why I believe this can happen over time, and what. So you compare it to a business, right? So compare it to Blockbuster, which eventually fails, and Netflix. What happens is over time, more and more people use Netflix. And less people use Blockbuster, and as more and more people, it just emerges, and by the time they unwind from the existing system, it doesn't feel as harsh as there's no solution.
It's almost like as Blockbuster failed, Netflix was scaling, and it just had a passing point where Netflix was larger.
And movies isn't that important. Global currency money is important, but it's the same premise. So what's happening is if you actually priced assets or priced anything in Bitcoin, in instead of pricing it in US dollars, if you priced everything in Bitcoin, what you would see is the real price declines of everything. So Bitcoin's going up in relation to them, but what's really happening is your value in Bitcoin is being stored as it's capturing more of the value of everything else.
Right. So like a single.
Could you explain? I mean, the thing with Bitcoin is to a lot of people, it sounds kind of crazy, right? Like because of these bubbles it's had in the past. I mean, I'm a big fan of it, but I think to the average person, it seems kind of crazy. Can you explain kind of why it's this, why it could be the solution? Like what about it?
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch to unpack there. We won't be able to do on this show, but if you said it's decentralized, meaning that governments can't control it. So if you go back to it through history, we used to have currencies pegged to the gold standard, and gold was always the thing that was scarce, and so people would hold their currencies to gold because it was scarce, and they would peg to gold. But because gold had to be centrally located and stored, governments always confiscated it when this was happening so that they could turn on the printing press that led to everything else. All throughout history, that's what it ends up happening. And and Bitcoin, because it's decentralized and it's 21 million total Bitcoin forever. You can't get any. It's built into the code that you can't print anymore, and it's owned and mined and nodes all around the world is decentralized. Nobody can confiscate it. Nobody. So there's a whole bunch of other things that make Bitcoin really valuable from that type of fixing money. But going back to what we just talked about here, so what I would say is, if people are thinking about Bitcoin, I personally think it is almost a mandatory in your portfolio. So critical. It becomes a lifeboat in what's happening, and it's critical. But if you go back to what we're saying about the transition, so we can avoid war, so we can avoid everything else, it's going to be super volatile on the way up, but it's going to be volatile on the way up. And if you measured the price of everything else in it, what you would see is what's really happening. It's everything else. It's not. You'll see the new system developing, and so you also gain a whole bunch of. And early on in that cycle, the people who are earliest win more. The companies that are earlier win more than other companies. The countries that are on earlier win more than other countries, and so you have this network effect that's building on Bitcoin. Same network effect that really powered the internet. So if you look at Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is now, remember, we miss these exponential patterns and what happens next. It's natural. And if you look at the growth of wallets and everything else and addresses on Bitcoin, it matches almost perfectly the internet 94, 95, 96. So it's growing at that same rate. And if you go back to the internet and you say, what did people, the titans of industry, say about the internet in 94, 95? They dismissed it as a joke. And who are the titans of industry today? All of the ones that took it, all of the ones that built onto it. And so that's what's happening. But again, it's because we perceive, just like the titans of industry looked at the internet at that time and said, I can't even download a cat picture, let alone a video. Right? It was useless. It was really useless. You couldn't see all the use cases afterwards because it's hard to project what would happen with the innovation. Same thing is happening with Bitcoin right now, and we're really early in that stage. But if you really understand it as what is money anyways, it's just an abstraction. Why does gold have value? Because we believe it does.
Right.
It's not because of it doesn't have a $12 trillion market cap because of jewelry. It's because people believe it will one day again be tied to currencies, and it won't be. I don't believe it will be. We're the digital age, and what's required is we need a digital currency that can be trusted, or digital store of value that can be trusted globally over time, that people can't manipulate. And so we remove the problem of having to trust somebody else to tell us what our money is.
I guess that actually makes a lot of sense, because as more and more people start to see the, I guess, growth Bitcoin has. I mean, today, people look at it as an asset class to own, but very well it could become the de facto currency, especially as it stabilizes over time. Because assuming nothing changes in our current financial system, where growth needs to occur, it can only be assumed that at some point you can't just continue to print money and kick the can down the road, which effectively sets up volatility within the US dollar, which then, if enough people have merged by then to Bitcoin, we can comfortably start to move our transition to, a cryptocurrency, let's say it's Bitcoin, as the de facto standard across the globe. Yeah. Which could be the best case situation then. I mean, then,
so just play that forward. And so a couple of years ago, it would have taken 25 Bitcoin to buy the average house in the US.
Right.
Today, it takes 5.
Right.
Right. in 2 or 3, and maybe that by the end of this year it'll take 1 or 2. That's what's happening. So as you price things and what you actually see, this is what's happening. The real value, everything else is a bubble. People that say Bitcoin is a bubble or a Ponzi scheme, I love this. A Ponzi scheme is when you keep on, you have to print more money, or you have to drive more people or money into the bottom of the system to be able to keep it going. So everything in the existing system is a Ponzi scheme as a byproduct of what's happening. The only thing that's not a Ponzi scheme is the one that can't be manipulated.
Right, because there's no necessary artificial growth that's current. Well, you're not forcing growth as you are currently in every other asset class in the U.S. economy, at least. And globally, I'm sure I'm just not familiar enough globally, so I can't speak to it. Global.
Yeah.
So on that kind of a front, then why Bitcoin, and what are all these other cryptocurrencies? Are those what's muddying the waters around the space?
So again, I'm going to go back to business to be able to show this. Companies that I think a lot about in technology, there's millions of, like, hundreds, thousands of people come to me to try to get me involved in their companies and everything else, and I don't have the time. What I think about is, okay, number one, I have to love the entrepreneurs. Right. Number two, I have to believe that what they're doing has an impact to people, like a really positive impact to people. And number three, when I have to think I am valuable in that equation, and I can help them because my time runs out. Right. But a framework that's useful that I use is, does this innovation have a 10 times advantage over the company where they're competing? Does it have, because it has to have an order of magnitude type of advantage, because otherwise the thing they're breaking, it has more marketing power, has more everything else, and they would never have enough money to get people to be able to they'd never be seen in all the noise. So it has to have a compelling, like 10 times value in addition. And normally what a lot of entrepreneurs mistakenly do is they go and they try to create that 10x in everything. So I'm going to be 10 times better than Microsoft. And what real innovation does is picks I can be the biggest fish in the smallest pond. So they make their market super small, and they're 10 times better in that. So if you looked at Google in free search, there wasn't a market. Nobody could get paid in it. And so everybody was charging money for search and for advertising. Google said, I have free search, which meant the big titans of industry didn't see them. And as everybody went there and built to Google, then they went everywhere else. Tesla, when they started from the Roadster, right? A tiny part of the market to prove that, and then expand everywhere else. So why we dismiss that 10x advantage is, by the time that the challenger beats the incumbent, we think it always looked like that. So again, the 10x is start with a small market where you can provide huge value to that small market. And if you looked at that in Bitcoin versus gold is that small market. Today, people say, well, Bitcoin's a terrible currency. I can't use it. Like, what can I pay in Bitcoin and everything else? And it didn't need to go into currencies yet. The first market is gold. Is it a better value than gold? And did it change? It's a monetary paradigm shift. It's a staggering it changed the whole. We always thought we needed to trust somebody else to do this. And this cryptography and this process of blockchain changed that rules that we can trust code and a system, which changes everything else. So, and then because it can be because it's decentralized, because of the network, because of everything else, it's just a way better store of value than gold, in my opinion, for a whole bunch of reasons. From there, and now I'm going to get into all the other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is about a $700 billion market cap. And the network effect is, it is now, so what I just did is I showed you how innovation beats a monopoly. And now Bitcoin, you could say, is a mini monopoly against gold, because it's already so big and it's growing so fast, and it has all these people. And the more people that come on, more people trust it, drive more people on, and more, and so that's what's happening. So every other cryptocurrency or every other coin you have to look at is it a 10x to Bitcoin? Is it 10 times better than Bitcoin? And I don't see anything right now. Maybe something comes, maybe something comes afterwards. But the payment layer, the secondary layer, say, that's happening on Bitcoin, like I'm not sure if you're aware, but Lightning Network and everything else is on top of Bitcoin. So it eradicates a whole bunch of the other things these coins have even talked about, because it uses this network and it's a secondary layer to the network. So that's why I don't right now spend a lot of time. Not that you couldn't make some money on them,
Sure.
in kind of, but it to me that's day trading. I think
Right.
about some. I think about. It's not money that I need, right? It's not that I do this podcast for a different reason. I do that. If more people understood what we're talking about in these systems colliding, you would more people would be talking about, okay, how do we get to a solution that is actually tenable, rather than band-aids on something else that is completely untenable.
So you think it's a matter of education at this point? Like, how can we, I mean, this is what you're doing with this book and these podcasts. You're trying to educate people, because these concepts are super, I mean, to the average person, really hard to understand, right?
It's really hard, Aaron. Really, that's it. And I had to write the book in a way to, and not simplify it, but in story and everything else. And I had to touch a whole bunch of tops of waves of things and tie them together to be able to see what was happening. But yes, it's education, because I explore this concept a little bit in the book, and remember, it's a feature of technology, not a bug, but it's a feature of humanity, not a bug. What I'm about to say, it's easier to be around people that share your beliefs. Technology just amplifies that, and why you believe something is because a whole bunch of people, and you're in a cone that keeps on reinforcing on itself, and you don't see it. And very few people question these types of core beliefs, because they're foundational to everything else that we grew up with. It's really hard. So it's really easy to throw stones and throw stones in glass houses, right? And people who live in glass houses throw stones, and think it's other people and everything else, and it's us too. So these are so foundational concepts that I'm talking about. People can welcome to their own opinions and everything else, but I would ask on those opinions, fact check those opinions. Just fact check them. Just keep on, ask why. Search out the answer and come to your own conclusions from there. But in a world that is just noise, and everybody believing in these things that are believable, because we've always believed them. And somebody tells me this, and we don't question the roots of money very often. It's way deeper a concept than most people will even take the time to understand. But once you see it, once you understand what's happening, it just completely changes your view about a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, I mean, when I read your book and I learned about it, honestly, it was in March and April. I started getting kind of interested in this topic. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, especially because I come from a background in environmentalism and sustainable technology, and it almost just feels like it feels like there's this sort of this whole big problem that's causing the problem that I'm trying to focus on, and if that big problem is not solved, it almost feels like I'm not putting my energy to the toward the cause that's really causing it all.
Yeah, and I sent a tweet to Elon on the same thing, and I asked him to, and now obviously he's not going to answer every single thing, but one of his CEOs of Neuralink is a good friend of mine. So this concept, she knows, and a bunch of but it's still so hard when you're facing your day-to-day business. I don't know how the environmental challenge could be solved. It can't be solved out of the existing system. It's impossible. And if somebody wants to tell me how that's possible, I'm open to a debate. If anybody in the environment that wants to take issue with what I'm saying, I'm wide open to that debate. But I don't see it's. If you keep on, you have to mathematically keep on distorting money, and in other words, you invalidate all of the innovation that is coming. All of the good things that we're working on that can solve these problems, you invalidate them by printing more money.
Right, and in order to really notice that, you have to really
zoom out.
It's like the biggest picture possible.
Yeah, you have to zoom out, and you have to ask questions that we don't normally ask ourselves.
And if the current system is benefiting you, why question it, right? That's the problem. It's like, and those who it's not benefiting, oftentimes they don't have a lot of power to.
Well, the funny thing is, and this is where maybe there's some conspiracy theories, maybe this, but most of that, Aaron, is just noise. I can tell you, I'm in YPO, the number of billionaires, friends, and everything else, that the same concept that I'm talking about, they don't know. It's not bad people. Now, when they know, there's bad actors in every system. So but I would say there's more good actors. When they know that they want to solve this too. I didn't know. Like, I've been talking about this for about 10 years, and finally, I thought to myself, why isn't anybody else talking about this? And finally, I'm the most reluctant author ever. Everybody asked me to write another book. I didn't want to write the first book. But nobody was putting the pieces together, so I felt I had to. But to that point, just like a whole bunch of people over here don't know that their pocket is being picked, there's a whole bunch of people here that don't know that they're beneficiaries of this. And it's caused by the same thing. We don't question our paradigms very often. We believe the things we've been told to believe and everything else. And we hang out with people like that, and we miss what's really happening. It's universal against. I try to use concepts, from the book, but I try to, even on this podcast, I try to use concepts that don't make me look smarter than everybody else, because it's me too. When the exponential, I don't teach that from those people don't understand this. It's when you see concepts that we all miss, when you see something in society like us in our own information bubble, and if you feel like it's easier to hang out with friends that don't challenge your beliefs, then it's true for all of us. It's true for me, everything else. And so if that's true, then we should look harder for things that might make us uncomfortable, might make us search for more truth.
And that requires a huge shift in just the way many people tend to live, right? I mean, I think the challenge that I have with everything, just kind of taking this from a top-down kind of approach, is most people don't recognize that this is a problem. And I didn't until I read your book, until Aaron suggested, hey, you gotta read this book, this is great. And then we reached out to you. The way I kind of saw it too is this even a problem right now? Because things are operating, it's not great. It's not a perfect system. Nothing is ever perfect in life, but it's functioning so far, but really it's just functioning artificially because of the way we're approaching things. And it fundamentally is a big problem, because the only way out of it to fix the system either requires significant suffering or banking on the fact that enough people become aware of the problem and decide to start to migrate to something like cryptocurrency, if that ends up becoming the de facto way to actually solve the current economic system we're in. Um, like on that kind of a note or on that kind of a thread, then how do you make a person aware of a problem without necessarily approaching them and saying your current worldview is inaccurate? I mean, it's almost like speaking about religion, right? You don't take away a man's religion just because the consequences of doing so break down an entire worldview that, unless done very carefully, um, and I guess that's in a way sharing propaganda in a weird kind of sense, but you can't take away this concept of religion from many people, and in a way the current financial system is a religion to 99% of the globe.
But
How do you educate people?
You're doing it right now. So simple truths that change our lives, we can't unsee. My book is a simple truth that changes the perception across a huge amount of people that are building onto that message and moving forward. It's a really and it's really hard. That truth cuts through the noise, right? So what you're doing right now is amplifying that message to a whole bunch of other people. Some people will take that and they'll look deeper and they'll discover this and take it on, because again, you could question it if you want, but if it's true, then you probably amplify it, just like you're doing. It's hard. It's one of those things that enters your brain and it starts to rummage, and you realize, oh my God, it's everywhere. You see that manipulation of money and everything else that I think I'm worried about. It's all caused by something that I haven't ever looked at.
Right.
And so, but the other way, if people are really like, I say, okay, explain to me why inflation is good. What? Just explain to me how, if you really believe in climate, that inflation is good, and then okay, so because people will spend more and they won't save. Okay, explain how to me that matches with climate, and then explain it. So, do you believe that we should manipulate money? Explain to me why, and who, and if you believe that we should manipulate money, then explain to me who gets to manipulate it,
and why do they get to?
And why do they get to? And if you keep on asking somebody else to explain their beliefs to you instead of you defending yours, they'll get to their own conclusions faster on their belief set, and they might come to their own conclusions. And just wait, why do I believe this?
I mean, that definitely makes sense, because at like a surface level, the general argument for inflation would be, yes, you spend more, and hopefully the people who are aggregating wealth and power, they're going to distribute it evenly across people, which rarely never happens.
Does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't.
But again, so again, once you ask somebody the question, like the entire belief set, like, okay, right? There's no answers.
Right, that's very true. No,
it's a consolidation of power to, I trust somebody else to tell me what to do.
No, that's very true. That's very true.
Like, no, I've had this conversation with like so many people since I read your book, Jeff, like my family. And I mean, people are starting to kind of like, I mean, it's such a complicated pitch. I mean, not a complicated pitch, but you have to be careful about how you say it, especially because you don't want to get personal. And I've kind of started to figure it out, and I am making people kind of question it. People are starting to reach out to me about this, well, namely Bitcoin. But just, you know, I even convinced my dad last weekend to put money to, like, just think about like how the system works. Because I'm like, hey man, you put my brother through college like 15 years ago, and it cost you like less than half, you know, as it did me. Yeah. And, you know, he kind of just took this for granted. But then you start questioning it, and it's like, oh, maybe something is kind of off or wrong.
And then, and there's a couple concepts here, because some people would say in Bitcoin, okay, well, you just transferred wealth to a whole bunch of new people and they have all the money and power. it's so kind of first order. By the way, Bitcoin is far more distributed right now even than it is than the existing currency system is in wealth and power. So it's far more equal now, but it becomes more and more equal because what you're doing is, let's just imagine a situation where I decide I have 10,000 Bitcoin, and I'm at now billions and billions of dollars and everything else, and whatever number that is, and I'm the wealthiest person in the world. To retain that wealth now in a new system, I either have to just spend below my means. So if I let's say I wanted to, now I'm going to consolidate power and I'm going to build an army. By doing so, I distribute my wealth, and I don't have that power anymore. And that's kind of the point. The more and more you have, the more and more you try to manipulate, and by power, you spend your wealth into society to do it, and you lose your power. So it has to, a system like that actually distributes the gains broadly. There is not the same dislocation and inequality in society, yet no society is completely equal. Yeah, I'm not talking about equal. I'm talking about fair rules and everything else. So, but because of that, it drives that. Another thing that people talk about a lot, and probably you'll get on your show, is the energy of Bitcoin, the energy that it takes to mine Bitcoin to secure the network. And it uses more energy than Switzerland right now. But if you think about what is in the network itself, it's actually a race to low cost energy and clean energy. What's happening right now, actually in Alberta, the gas flares that they're flaring into, and that's actually being used for Bitcoin production. A whole bunch of the solar is enhanced. It's actually it will be over time a kind of a codependency that'll be created, because that solar, it has to, because the energy during the day produces too much energy and prices come down, and that energy can't go anywhere. And so it actually, Bitcoin mining actually helps that. It helps the advance of lower cost energy, because Bitcoin to mine Bitcoin, you're chasing lower cost energy all the time. So it helps that. On the other side of it, the other side is even far bigger. And that's the thing, that energy stored and transported across time in kind of in that currency form is actually because it forces deflation and it forces the abundance of technology. We stop being on a system that requires ever more growth. So the biggest cause of planetary harm is a system that causes more and more growth. And Bitcoin is a system that fixes that. And it fixes it forever. And it fixes that it allows the right set of growth. It doesn't manipulate money, so we have to grow more and more all the time. So if you looked at it in context of the overall system, it requires way less energy than the existing system ever will.
No,
one must understand the existing system to come to that conclusion.
Right.
That's the kicker, and that's the sort of conclusion, really. I mean, it'd be really interesting. I think it'd be really powerful. I'm not sure if anyone's ever done this, and it could probably maybe even possible to sort of try to quantify the amount of, the difference in energy that Bitcoin requires versus like this existing economic system, and the really the unnecessary growth. Like, what is this difference? Is it like, it's probably like not even a half, 0.1%,
Yeah, it'd be such a staggering small part of what but remember, the existing system has to get worse. Has to get worse again. Has to get worse again. So it would be hard, but it's hard to comprehend, because more oil, more production, more buying, more forever, more forever has to happen in the existing system against nature, which is wanting to bring the prices down and drive that innovation. So it's exponentially more printing on the other side that has to. So yeah, but people don't look at it.
Right. I think what you're doing with this education is I mean, it's really, I mean, awesome, because you got me hooked and Swarnov's interested. Like, we're going to talk to our communities, which are people who are not really involved with economic, I mean, cryptocurrency. People in climate are not typically involved with both.
But again, not just that, because they haven't asked these questions.
Right.
They actually think, are you kidding me? That's destroying the planet. That's right. And because they haven't asked the next question, and it's believable. If you read the mainstream news without any of this, because they don't see the system, they're talking about pieces of the system instead of the overall system. You might come to that conclusion as well. And if a whole bunch of friends thought about that and everything else, they would come to that conclusion as well. So I understand it, because they haven't asked a deeper question.
Right.
Awesome. So I see we're kind of coming up on the time we had. I'm happy to keep talking. I'm having fun. And I'm sure you have plenty of things to do.
Yeah, I should run. Yeah.
I want to ask you a final question, which is I'm really curious about. Over the past year, I'm sure this has been a pretty insane year for you. I mean, everybody, but especially with your book and the sort of Bitcoin community. What have you learned about yourself through this time of like releasing this book? Is there anything?
What I'd say is, when I wrote the book, I said to my wife, I said, I have to do this, and there's a good chance, there's a better than average chance that it destroys all of the companies or people. People will not want to be around me, right? Because when you go up against an entire system, and all of your wealth is in that system, and everything, and technology entrepreneurs want me on their boards, want me to be part of the teams and everything else. And the system could rebel, and it could make me persona non grata, right? Persona non grata everywhere. And we have to be ready for that risk. And I have to be comfortable before we write this book to do that. And because to me, it was a bigger deal. I don't make any money from these podcasts or anything else. I'm not trying to monetize this at all. I could care less about any money from the book itself. But it's been, and so I went up thinking this is going to be really bad, and it's been exactly the opposite. It's been so crazy that how it's become a bestseller in a whole bunch of different countries. It's driving these conversations with politicians, with technology leaders. It has a voice of its own now, and that's perfect. If other people took it and amplified this and everything else, I do not need to be the guy. So that's been just a wonderful experience. Aaron, I'm going to take this a little deeper into what does it change about me? Probably nothing. The book itself, besides, or this process itself, besides, I'm filled with gratitude of kind of the amazing people I've met throughout the journey. I need to be careful of this, and I didn't write this in the book. Actually, it came out in the editing. But one of the things that I've come to believe in myself and everybody is most of the things we do is in service to belonging and love. And I'm going to go. So when you see it on everyone else, you can see it clearly. So and by the way, a lot of the things we do on that in service of belonging and love, we push away the thing we want most in service of it. I'll use an example, the victim archetype. So the victim, what do they really want? They want to belong. They want to matter, right? And what happens when they burnt out every friend around them, searching for that validation, is they double down and they create more drama. Right? So they're pushing away everything they want with the thing they want. I'm going to connect this back to me in a second, but if you ask the thing that I've known for some time, and so everybody knows that the victim is doing that, but nobody tells them, right? They tell their friends, they tell everything else, but if that's one of those things. If it's true in other people, it's probably true in you. And it's true in all of us. So what else do we do? So the person, I could easily get addicted to what we're doing right now, because it's so fulfilling when other people tell you you made a difference in their life. Love and belonging. And I could do this all day long, all my time, everything else. And I could take what I want most, or I want other things that I want most, family, everything else. And I could take all my time into this and convince myself it was about everybody else when it was really about me, about fulfilling that. Just like the victim pushing away the thing they want most with a thing that gives them love and belonging, or the person chasing money at all costs for and saying it's for their family, and working 24 hours a day saying it's for the family. It's that thing in us. I think we all share it. We want to belong. We want to matter. It's really about love. And we try to get that through a whole bunch of different ways in our communities and our different things. It's not good or bad. It just is. And so if you said the one thing I have to be careful about in all of this is that same thing. So why am I doing it? So besides, I wanted people to see. Do I really need to be the guy? No, I don't need to be the. If you push that out, awesome. As more and more people are taking that message out, that hopefully changes things, I just back off, which is great.
Yeah, you're a spark in this. I mean, in a positive sense of creating this sort of flow of ideas of education. That's what you want to be.
And for everybody else that's listening to this, just realize that thing I just said about me in this, we all share it, right? We all share it in our own way. And why do we do the things we do? It's most of them are in service of that love and belonging in the end. So, and it's not good. It's not bad. It's a really good thing. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and when you're adding up your life and what you have, it's going in the direction that you want it to go in.
I think that's the most powerful thing that we've pulled out of this entire conversation, more than Bitcoin saving us all as an economy. Because there is a lot of pain in the world these days, and I feel like that self-awareness is very important. If anyone wants to continue the conversation with you on this, what's the best way to reach you? If there's anything that you'd like to mention of how they can reach you, or resources that you've written, or, of course, your book will be linked in the description. But what's the best way for people to continue the conversation with you?
Probably Twitter is the easiest for me. Just at Jeff Booth on Twitter is probably the easiest.
Awesome.